Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. We are going to do a little bit of a different video today. I'm going to share some of my experience with you all in getting started in the art world, in the illustration industry. Um, and I've talked about this before. I did do an art autobiography video a couple of years ago, but I rewatched that and I feel like there were a lot of things that I didn't address and that I would like to address now. Uh, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit. This is actually my second attempt at making this specific video. Um, yeah, I've been thinking about it because in the art world, and particularly the art world online, I feel like you see a lot of stories of instant success or people talking about their big break or the moment that changed everything for them, or how they went from 0 to 60 based off of this one interaction, or the big break, the big moment. That idea is really popular. And I wanted to share my story in terms of how I got started and how I got to where I am in the illustration world, because I have not experienced the creative industry, the creative life, the art world to be anything like that. To me, it's felt a lot more like a winding path almost, with lots of pitfalls and rabbit trails and what do they call those things? I'm not a hiker. Switchbacks, like when you're going back to go forward. Yeah, it's felt much more like that as opposed to like a nice straight line with a big shiny moment that reveals everything. So I figured I would share that with you all in more detail than I did in my art autobiography video, just in case it's helpful or encouraging for anybody, because I know that those big break stories do exist, but I have a feeling that those are actually pretty uncommon, and that most of the people who are working full-time in the creative industries would have more of a kind of winding path experience. So if we can all be more honest about that, and if the people, well, it's not that I've been being dishonest, it's just that I don't really talk about it that much. And the people that have the big shiny breaks do talk about it. So so I feel like making sure that as people who have the more ordinary experience, we're sharing that too. Hopefully that will be encouraging for everybody else who's getting started, or who, like all of us, is somewhere along the journey, somewhere along the path. All right, so I'm going to structure this kind of like a timeline. I'm going to go year by year and just talk about kind of like what big hallmarks were happening that year, what big events happened that year, and kind of where I was with respect to working full-time as an illustrator. So I'll start off just by saying that growing up, I definitely loved to draw. I loved making things. I loved working with my hands. But I was not one of those kids who loved to draw. Like, I would enjoy drawing for a little while, but I would always get frustrated. I would stop. I never spent like hours and hours dedicated to it. And I would periodically think, I'll be an artist when I grow up, but it was intermingled with, I'll be a cancer researcher, and I'll be an astronaut, and I'll be a doctor, and I'll be a writer. And basically I wanted to be all different kinds of things. I was never one of those kids who knew from an early age, I'm going to work as an illustrator. I want to be an artist. So just keep that in mind as I work through all of this. So with that perspective, I went into college. I had many different majors. I think I started out as an English major, but I didn't take my first drawing course until sophomore year of college, till the spring semester of my sophomore year. That was in 2005. So I took my first drawing class at that point, and it was just an elective. I absolutely loved it, and that was kind of the I guess maybe that was a big breakthrough moment. It was more of a mental breakthrough. It was like a big paradigm shift for me, because that was when I realized, oh, if I work hard at drawing, I can become better at it, just the same way as I can become better at math if I work hard at math, or I can get stronger at the gym if I lift heavier weights. It's like anything else. It's a muscle that can be grown and exercised. So that was 2005. Then in 2008, I graduated, and there wasn't any immediate prospect for me to work in the arts, to find a paying job as an artist. And my degree was in fine art, actually. I didn't even take a single illustration class ever. It was all in classical oil painting. So that gave me even less of an idea of where to go from there. So I found the best paying job that I could, that was the most flexible, that I also still kind of enjoyed, and that was SAT tutoring. So I worked with high schoolers to help them get their scores up for the SAT. If you're not from the US, the SAT is a standardized test that all American high school students, well, not all, but many American high school students have to take if they want to get into college. So I did that from 2008 to 2009, and I really wasn't making any art at that time. I would kind of dabble in things. I would come up with an idea for a project, and it would be like a really big project, and I would want to be tackling something that was like really deep and meaningful and important, and then I would start into it, and I would get overwhelmed, and I would stop. So our little studio space, we had a tiny 2-bedroom apartment at the time, and Eric had one half of it because he was still doing his graduate studies. He had one half of it, and I had the other half, and my little half was just full of unfinished projects, sketches and ideas and things that I started but didn't finish. And around that same time, during that year, that 2008 to 2009, I started dealing with some major health issues. I have talked about this some on this channel, but I had been relatively healthy to that point. I had had like allergies and asthma and those sorts of things, but I was a relatively normal, healthy young person at that point, and then started dealing with some pretty major and then eventually catastrophic health issues where I was in and out of the hospital and would have days on end where I couldn't get out of bed from dealing with pain. I have to look at the dates, but I think it was like 3.5 or 4 years before I got a diagnosis. I could make a whole other video about that. It wouldn't have anything to do with art. But I eventually got, sicker and sicker and sicker, and was dealing with more and more health stuff. And because of that, around 2009, I had been working as this SAT tutor, kind of trying to make art, and then at the same time dealing with all of these health issues. And I still feel like I'm unpacking what that means and what I think about it and why it made me feel this way. But at the time, it made me feel like art was not something that I could invest my time in. And I think I was feeling so disconnected from my own like physical self, from my own body, that I just couldn't really get up the energy to make art, which is like a physical expression. I couldn't do that. And I found myself caring a lot more about things like, whether homeless people in Boston, we lived in Boston at the time, and I was seeing a lot of homelessness on the streets, and I found myself caring more about like whether homeless people had a place to live and whether kids were hungry and could go to school. I just felt more urgent, I guess, around those kinds of things, because what I was dealing with on a day-to-day basis in terms of like whether I could get out of bed, whether I could eat, whether I would end up in the ER, like was so urgent. So I applied for and got a community organizing fellowship. So I spent a year working as an organizer in a neighborhood in inner city Boston. And then, and that was a great experience. It was incredibly challenging. I wasn't doing art at all during that point. Never drawing, never making anything. And mentally, in terms of like my self-image, I really didn't even think of myself as an artist. And I thought, well, that was a kind of interesting thing I did in college, and I guess that's over now. And I never thought I would go back to it. And from there, after that initial year in the fellowship, the community organizing internship, I was offered a full-time job with that organization. I was on staff. I did more organizing. I did training. I coached up-and-coming organizers. And then eventually, after a couple of years in that, so that was from 2010 to 2012, I did start tackling a few little graphic design projects here and there, mostly because of anybody in the organization. I was the only one who had any visual art experience or literacy at all. I didn't have any understanding of how to do graphic design, so I had to teach myself the programs, but I started doing that because it was something that we needed to support the work that we were doing. Then it was mid-2012 that I got diagnosed, and I think I have talked about this. I don't remember what video I talked about this in, but I'm pretty sure I have talked about this before. And getting diagnosed with what I would eventually find out was an autoimmune disease, and hearing from the doctor that I needed to make a choice between working the kind of hours that I was working. I was working probably on average 55 or 60 hours a week. There were weeks when it would be 75 or 80 hours. And it was very stressful. It was very meaningful, but it was very, very stressful work for me. And the doctor basically said, like, if I ever wanted to have a chance of getting things under control, in addition to all the medication I was going to have to go on and the lifestyle changes I was going to have to make, I would also have to make a serious effort at reducing stress. So talking with my colleagues, we came to a mutual decision that it was the best choice for me to resign at that point. And looking back, I feel like that was kind of the emotional rock bottom for me. Even though I had been dealing with this health crisis for so many years and had been so sick, and that was terrible. I think I always had in my head, like, oh, I'll get diagnosed and then they'll give me a shot and I'll be better and I'll be able to do these things that I want to do, and have a normal body, have the body that other 20-somethings have, and be able to just, live my life the way that I want to. And so when I got diagnosed and realized that that wasn't going to happen, it was pretty devastating. And I knew that there was a possibility of eventually getting somewhat better, or to a better place than where I was, but that it was going to be something that I would always live with and always have to manage. I was very depressed. And then on top of that, to not have work that I was going to on a regular basis, and I was sitting at home alone, that just made it even worse. So it was a really dark time, and I'm still deeply grateful to my family and to Eric. They were extremely supportive, and in many ways, I'm very lucky that I was able to do that I was able to resign and prioritize my health for some time. Because of being in that really dark place, I was motivated to start making things again. And that motivation was not internal, it was external. I've talked about this before too, but my younger sister Carly, who I have made a video with before, I need to do another one with her again at some point soon, but she was really instrumental in that she just gave me, I can't remember, I think it was maybe for Christmas of 2012. So it was like mid-2012 that I resigned, and then late 2012, Carly gave me a pad of watercolor paper and the 24 set of Prismacolor watercolor pencils. And she basically said, like, Henry Matisse made art from bed, and so can you. And part of me was just like, oh, please, come on, like, that is so, that's in the past. I don't do that anymore. It had been, it had been like close to, it had been 4 years at least since I had like seriously even picked up a pencil. But I had nothing else to do, and I was learning about myself that I needed to have some kind of purpose every day, or I would just get more and more depressed. So I decided I was going to start making art of any art that I could. And initially I started with trying to do portraits from memory of family and friends and everyone I had ever met. So I still was kind of holding on to some of those unrealistic goals and ideas for these larger than life art projects. Yeah, I knew I wanted to try to make one of those every day. And then I also decided at that point that I needed to put it online to help kind of motivate myself. It was when a lot of people were doing the 365 projects, and I didn't commit to a 365 project. I just committed to a day-by-day project where I said, like, every day I'm going to do this, and this is going to kind of help keep me on track. So initially I just had the pad of paper, the pencils. I was taking pictures with my phone and then uploading it to Tumblr. And then in relatively short order, in like probably a couple of months, maybe even like 6 weeks, I I noticed that I was actually more interested in painting food, and this was the start of me painting food. Yeah, so I started just picking different foods that were around the house. A lot of it was packaged food initially, so I remember I did sriracha, I did a plum, I did some bon maman, I did jalapeno peppers, and these were all things that we had just sitting around, and I would take a picture of it, and then I would sit on the couch with my smartphone or in bed with my smartphone looking at the picture and making the piece with the watercolor pencils. And then I started I had this old set of Prismacolor pencils that I had in high school that belonged to my dad when he was in art school, and so I had that set of colored pencils, and I started incorporating those as well. So that was early 2012 and kind of throughout 2012, and I just would make this work and put it on Tumblr. I had no designs on being a professional illustrator. Initially, it really was just a survival mechanism. It was just something that I was doing so that I didn't go crazy from sitting by myself and feeling useless all day. So that was the start of 2012. And then I think I'll have to go back and double check this for sure. But I think early 2013 was when I had my first piece on the Tumblr radar. And if I remember correctly, it was that sriracha that I mentioned. And at the time, I remember thinking that's it. That's going to be my big break. Wow, maybe I'm really going to do this. Maybe I actually am going to be an artist after all. And there was a lot of attention, and it got picked up and carried in a few little online, smaller online publications. And I was amazed by that, and I thought that was so cool. And then, things kind of went back to normal, and I was still just putting out piece of artwork after piece of artwork every day. Tumblr following was growing, but that was really all that was happening. And then in the summer of 2013, so a bit over a year after I had started on Tumblr, I started getting more and more requests to sell work and to create prints and to sell originals. So I opened up an Etsy shop, and I started doing some private commissions, and my Tumblr audience was still growing. And then it wasn't until October of 2013, and I do remember this because I was able to find the invoice for it. October of 2013, I had my first commercial illustration job, my first commercial assignment, and that was for a New Zealand food brand called Pam's, and I created this pretzel illustration for them that was used on their packaging, and it was a really great project. I loved it, and at that point I started thinking more seriously, okay, I could, between Etsy and between doing this, maybe somehow I can figure out how to make a job out of this, and this is something that I can do even when I'm in pain. One thing that was amazing to me that I learned throughout this was that even when I was feeling really sick, I could still draw. And that was never true with organizing. It was always harder to get up in front of a crowd of people or to teach or to motivate people if I was not feeling well, and I didn't have to be 100% to draw. So yeah, that was when it kind of started clicking in my head, maybe I will actually be able to do this. And then also in I think 2013, late 2013, I was contacted by a company called Little Collector, and they're a subsidiary of ArtStar, which is a subsidiary of, I can't remember whether it's Christie's or Sotheby's, but it's one of the big art auction houses. And they represented really famous artists and illustrators. I remember Lisa Congdon was there. She was represented by them. William Wegman, the guy who does the portraits of the Weimaraners, he was represented by them. A bunch of other super famous people. And that was another thing that was oh yeah, this is it. This is going to be my big break. This is going to be what makes it possible for me to be a real professional artist. And at that point, I was bringing in some income from this, obviously, from Etsy and from private commissions, and then I did sign on with Little Collector, so they started selling some of my prints. I got royalties from that, but I had only had that one commercial commission just for Pam's, and so really what I was bringing in was it was not a full-time living at all. It was not very much, but it was more than I would have been if I was doing nothing, which was what I had to do for my health at that point. So that brings us through 2013 and the first part of 2014. Okay, so 2014, I was continuing to do most of the same stuff, making an illustration pretty much every day. Well, really more what it was like posting something every day. So usually what I would do is I'd be working on a few different pieces at the same time, and I would post a couple of days of work in progress shots, and then I would post the finished shot. And I had already obviously gotten a scanner. I think I ended up getting a scanner right around the same time I started on Etsy, which was, what did I write down here? Summer of 2013. So all through 2014, I'm just continuing to do the same thing. Etsy, posting stuff online, making a little bit of income from art sales, but that's really it. So August of 2014 was when I got my first editorial commission, and that was from the very sadly now deceased Lucky Peach magazine, which was a really, really cool magazine that was like all about food, but they really heavily invested in art and artists, and they just had amazing illustrations, and they used illustration in really creative ways and featured it really prominently. And I already was a huge fan of Lucky Peach, and had wanted to do some stuff for them. So that was really cool. And then a couple months later, November of 2014, I had another packaging project. It was again a larger commercial client. This one was in the US. This was for some candle packaging, so I think that technically falls in the like homewares or home fragrance industry. And then in December of 2014, I was contacted by another company that does some like print on demand stuff. So I was still continuing to work with Little Collector, but Uncommon Goods reached out to me and asked if they could carry a few of my prints as well. And in each of these instances, with Lucky Peach, with Zodax, and again with Uncommon Goods, every time I would think like, oh yeah, this is going to be it. This is going to be the thing that like opens all the doors, and I'm going to get like 1 million clients after this. Because at this point, I really was starting to think of it like a career and something that I really wanted to do, and started to see myself that way. And each of these assignments was great, but they were just kind of like trickling in little bit by little bit. There wasn't any one of them that opened the floodgates. That being said, 2015 was probably when I started to have a bit more traction. So, it was like really late 2012, early 2013 that I started kind of being more serious about putting stuff out there, and did get a few commercial commissions those first couple of years, but really it wasn't anything consistent. 2015 was when I started to see more consistency. I had my first inquiry from a really big brand, I still can't say the brand because I signed a non-disclosure, but it was a brand that everybody would know. Everybody of a certain age, everybody 21 and older would know. I'll say it that way. And that ended up not panning out. I don't really know why. I don't know if it's because they thought I was too inexperienced or because I didn't put together a good enough quote. I did ask for feedback and they never had a chance to get back to me. Art directors are really busy, so I don't take that personally. I don't think there are any hard feelings there, but that was something that I thought, oh yeah, this will be huge. This will be a really big thing. And I ended up not even landing the job. But mid-2015, I did more work coming through 2015, through the mid part of 2015, I did more editorial work, including another round with Lucky Peach, and then more like small kind of regional magazines, I guess, like travel magazines for certain areas. I did several of those. Lucky Peach was national distribution, but it was kind of an indie magazine, so it wasn't the same thing as like, Vanity Fair or Real Simple or any of those. So yeah, mostly kind of these smaller publications. I did some more packaging work in 2015. And then it was October of 2015 that I started on YouTube. And I didn't really know whether I would make anything of that or how long I would stick with it. But now it is the first part of 2019. It's early 2019, and here I am, 3.5 years later, still making videos. So that was 2015, and I definitely brought in more illustration income in 2015, but it still really wasn't up to the level of a full-time income. 2016 was kind of more of the same. For the first time, I started licensing existing works, so works that I had already done, that I kind of had out there in my portfolio. I had people coming to me asking to use them for existing projects. For a big way that this happened was a lot of like smaller or startup companies wanting to have artwork that they could use on their labels without having to do like a full-on buyout, just to kind of let them basically try out their product and see if it would work or not. So I started doing quite a bit of that. And then in September of 2016, I did my first like big magazine, which was for Vanity Fair France. So they're owned by Condé Nast, which is like one of the big publishers, magazine publishers. And then a couple months after that, December 2016, I landed my first regular ongoing editorial assignment that was going to be like a monthly thing for Real Simple. And I did it for 4 months, and I would have kept doing it, but I think, I'm trying to remember how this went. They were either bought out or there was like some kind of big restructuring. But basically the art director and all of the creative staff was let go. So I kind of went along with that because the new art director wanted to bring on his own illustrators and his own stamp and all of that. So, but those were a great few months. It was a big publication, national distribution, some of the biggest name stuff that I had had so far. Circling to the end of 2016, that was the first year that I made a full-time income off of illustration. And you know, that would be everything combined. That would be like retail sales and commercial commissions. And initially retail was like a larger portion of my business because that was really all I was doing, and just like little commercial clients here and there. And then as time went on, the commercial income started to increase, and the amount that I was bringing in from retail started to decrease somewhat because I wasn't able to put as much time into building that out. So yeah, from 2013, 2014, 2015. So basically it took like 3 years of me doing this kind of on the side or part-time to actually be making a full-time income from it. And I think if I hadn't gotten sick, I probably would have just, well, it's such a hard thing to say because I actually don't even know if I would have gone back into art. I don't know if I would have started drawing again if I hadn't gotten sick. But let's just say that I did, and I was like everybody else and working a day job. I think the trajectory would have been like, you know, those 3 years kind of just doing illustration on the side and working my day job. 2016 would have been the year that I was ready to like make the leap. So you guys have asked before about like, how did I know when I was ready and how do you make the transition? And for me, it was different because it was like I had circumstances that were out of my control that made it so that I had to quit my my full-time job. But that didn't mean that I like automatically went into having a full-time income from freelance illustration. So I hope that makes sense. Just want to acknowledge those like 3 years where it was just really this kind of slow and steady build. Going into 2017, my work with Real Simple continued. It was like the end of 2016 through the spring of 2017. And then in 2017, I did lots more packaging illustration. I continued to license existing works, but I started doing more and more like new work that was specifically for a certain brand, for a certain package. I also did a couple of greeting card projects. I did one for Papyrus that still hasn't come out yet, I think. So I did that I can't remember, I'm gonna have to look at my notes. I think that comes out this year, 2019, but it might actually be 2020. I was blown away with greeting cards by like how long it takes. They plan things out really far in advance. And then another line of greeting cards with like more of an indie manufacturer. And then I continued to do editorial work, both for magazines and online. I did stuff with Eater and with Thrillist. And then late 2017, more packaging work. That was when I did the big Green Valley Organics project, and that was Not necessarily the largest brand in terms of like brand recognition that I had worked for, but it was the biggest single project I had ever done. And that was a really great experience. And then also late 2017 was when I started working with Milk Street. And initially it was just like a couple of spot illustrations here and there. And if you watch my channel, you know that that has continued, and I've worked with them more and more over the years. I continue to work with them today. Then moving into 2018, which is the year that we just came through, kind of more of the same, more packaging illustration, more Milk Street illustration. Overall, I mean, really probably from 2016 onwards, the focus has continued to shift more and more towards client work, less and less towards retail. And I've continued offering retail stuff mostly as a way that I can connect with you guys, because you do ask to buy things, and which I am so appreciative of. But a struggle for me right now has been that the time that is required to do like private commissions or retail stuff is just, it can be a lot to manage. And I feel like I have felt like it's tough to balance both. It's tough to be doing like a really good job with retail and having new products and staying on top of it, and yeah, just doing everything that you need to do to run a successful shop and also run a successful commercial illustration business. So I have kind of felt that balance shifting over the years. I want to be able to keep offering retail, but that's a challenge. I have to keep thinking about how I'm going to do that in a way that's sustainable. A couple other things happened in 2018. I started on Skillshare, and 2018 I really, I had at that point a couple of years of full-time freelance income, and I was feeling like, okay, I want to make sure I'm being like strategic and diversifying. And even though I'm doing more and more client work, I want to also, develop other areas that I can potentially bring in revenue, so that if I have a slowdown in client work, I'll have something else to lean on. So I started developing some patterns and put work on Spoonflower. And some of this stuff I just, I see other people doing it, and people will suggest it to me. You guys will suggest something to me as an idea. I think that's how I started on Skillshare. Somebody suggested that I should look into that. So I just tried a few different things, and the few different things I tried in 2018 were fabric and more print-on-demand products on Redbubble, and then Skillshare as well. So that brings us to today. And this has just been like a really quick, well, it's not that quick. I have a feeling it's going to be a long video, but it's been an overview more or less of some of kind of like the landmark things, or the points that were touchstones for me across the last 5 or 6 years. And I'm not able to like go into like every single project that I did or everything that I learned from every single project. I do want to make another video. One project that I mentioned, actually I don't think I mentioned the client, but it was a mid-2015 project, and it was a big project, and it was a packaging project, and I made some really big mistakes in it. And the client was a very challenging client, and I learned a lot from that. So I know I want to make a dedicated video about that. Yeah, so I'd like to be able to kind of like go a bit deeper into some of these different points, but I just wanted to give you guys an overview so you can see like what a process it was and how gradual it was. I'm saying was, but I mean still is. It's still a process, and every year has been like incrementally a little bit more stable, a little bit better, a little bit more high profile clients. There hasn't ever been any like major big turning point for me, but it's just been this iterative, incremental, step by step, and then some steps back, and then some more steps forward process. And I'm still in that today. So Going forward in the next couple of years, like my immediate short-term goals, I feel like I want to do more editorial work. I really enjoy doing editorial work because I like learning and you get to read really interesting articles doing editorial work. And it's also good because even though I am getting to the point where I'm more established, I do still think of myself as someone who's kind of, hustling and trying to get started and trying to lay a good foundation. And editorial work is not the highest paying work you can do by any means, but it is good for getting your name out there because in addition to producing the work, you'll have right on there on the page illustration by Kendyll Hillegas. Whereas a lot of other types of illustration that you do, like whether it's for surface pattern or for greeting cards, at least one of the greeting cards I did will have my name on it, one of them won't. And definitely for packaging, you don't have your name on it. So, you might make this amazing work and people might really appreciate it, but they won't know who made it. So at least for the foreseeable, the next few years, I still want to continue investing in editorial work, even though it's not the highest paying, because it does help with the name recognition. And then continuing to seek out more packaging work. I think my style and the way that I work, my process is a really good fit for packaging and advertising because I do tend to do more time-consuming illustration that's pretty detailed, and so it costs more to make. And a challenge for editorial is making that style of work, the style of work that I create, work on a really tight timeline and a tighter budget. So just in terms of my process and the type of work that I create, I'm probably a more natural fit for packaging, advertising, that sort of thing. So those projects usually have longer timelines. They want more detail. They want things to be done on a larger scale, all of which I love doing. So I'm going to continue seeking that out, trying to do more of that kind of work and build out more of that section of my portfolio. Some pipe dreams or things that I would love to be involved in, but there's no immediate hint of this happening. I'm just kind of putting it out there. I'd love to do a cookbook. I'd love to build out the kind of floral and botanical section of my portfolio. I'd love to do more wildlife. And actually, so I wrote the script actually a couple of months ago. I've done it gradually because I've been thinking through all of this. And I see here a thing that I listed was that I want to do some more portraits. And I'm actually just starting on a big project right now that's going to be like 20-something corporate portraits for a really cool company. So yeah, that's already happening, and I'd like to continue doing that as well. I do want to be known for food because I love doing food illustration, and it's if you follow my work, it's like the major part of what I do. But I also want to be known just as somebody who can paint anything in a way that is relatively realistic, but still has feeling and sensitivity and emotion behind it. So further out, looking 3 to 5 years down the road, or maybe like 5 to 7 years down the road, I would really love to get into medical illustration. Just circling back to like how much I enjoy detail and things that are really in-depth and realistic. I also just love science, and I'm very interested in science. I love reading about science. So I think I would be a good fit for that. I don't know, I might even take a continuing education program, some sort of a certificate program in it. And then further down the road, I don't even know when this would be, because right now I'm just so focused on trying to build a solid career in commercial illustration and, help support my family that way. I would still love to go back to fine art, and I don't think it's an either or. I think I probably will always do some form of commercial illustration in my career, but I would also love to be creating paintings that were more open-ended and maybe even conceptual, doing some of the things that I did when I was in college, I guess. And, having gallery shows, doing that sort of thing. I have no idea what it will look like, what it would even look like in terms of style. But I just am aware that that's like a little seed down in my heart somewhere. And someday I think it's going to grow into something. I don't know what it will be yet, but maybe that'll be something I do when I'm like in my 50s and have more experience and something more to say. But yeah, I'm just aware that that's there. So I'm mentioning that as well. I know this video is already really long, but I do have a few other final thoughts that I want to share, particularly related to how I hope this video will encourage other people. So at this point, as you can tell by what I just shared, I do have more of a sense of direction and where I want to go and what I want to invest my time in than I did when I was first starting out, and certainly way more than I did when I first graduated. And I just didn't even have like the faintest idea of how I could go about making a career in, making a living, making a career in the arts. But I still really feel like that same person. I still feel like the same person who didn't know what they were doing and was just kind of trying to figure it out little bit by little bit. And even as I have started building more of a regular business, had a few years where I'm bringing in a full-time income just from art, just from illustration, even as I start working with more high-profile clients, all of these things happen and they have been amazing. But I want to be able to share that I still feel like the same person. I still doubt myself. I still don't know whether it's going to work. At the end of every single project I do, whether it's big or little, after every client email that I write, still my gut instinct, or the place that my brain goes, is, oh, they're never going to want to work with me again, or this will be my last client, or, you know, after this, so this was a good year, next year is going to be terrible, 2018 was a great year, 2019 I'm never going to work again. I still have that self-doubt, and I think that's part of why I am interested in scratching the surface on that like breakthrough moment, is because there's still a part of me that feels like I'm waiting for that to happen. And I think I want to make this, I'm wanting to make this video, I'm just realizing this at this point, because I want to say that it doesn't matter if it does or not. And I want to say that to myself. And if my career continues going the way it has been going, and it's just little step by little step by little step, that is going to be fine. That will be amazing, and I will be so grateful. And I just want to tell myself, and hopefully all of you from that the breakthrough moment, if you get one of those moments, that's awesome. But if you don't, that doesn't mean that you're not meant to work as an artist, to work in the creative field. And I think that really the thing that changed, it wasn't a breakthrough moment. It wasn't something that a client gave me, or that an agent brought to me when they said, will you let me represent you? I've never had an agent do that. But basically, it wasn't something that came from outside of myself. It was me hitting rock bottom when I got sick and realizing that it was out, my body was something that I couldn't control, and that there were so many things in life that I couldn't control, and that I would never, just because of my personality, I was never going to be one of those people that just knew where I was headed or how to get there. For me, it was always going to feel a little misty and unsure. And the shift that happened in that moment, my breakthrough moment at that rock bottom place, was realizing that the only thing I could do was take one more step. Was just, even if I didn't know where I was going, even if it was dark and I couldn't see, just having the faith to take one step in front of me, to just kind of put my toes out there and see if there was solid ground. And then the next day to do that again, and the next day to do that again. And every day to keep doing that until, you know, you get a little bit more confident, and you can look up from the ground a little bit and see 2 steps down the road, 3 steps down the road, a few steps down the road, and maybe start to have a plan for where you're going. I don't know if this video is even going to make sense, or if it's going to be totally unrelatable, but I hope if you are in that place of not knowing, and not knowing how to get where you want to go, or even where you want to go, I hope that you can be encouraged to just keep taking baby steps. And even if that doesn't feel like much, to not doubt that, to just keep moving, keep putting one foot in front of the other, and trusting that something will emerge from that. And it may not be what you expect. I am so grateful for my life and my creative career. And it is honestly nothing like what I expected. And if I were to look back and tell myself before I got sick or right after I got sick that this was what was coming, that would have been such a curveball. And I don't think I could have even like made it happen any faster if I had done it by my own strength. So I hope this video has been helpful, that it connects with those of you who need to hear it. And if you are feeling some of those same feelings, please do take a minute to put that in the comments. I know from experience that when I was in that place, hearing from other people made all the difference in the world. So I'm trying to do my part by putting this out there, and if you want to be a part of that too, please do share. And if you're needing encouragement, then take a look, and hopefully there will be the right words of encouragement there for you. So yeah, I hope everybody has a really good week, and that you keep on putting one foot in front of the other, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.